What's up, Daniel? Down there in Costa Rica. I mean, you're in a tank top. Looks like, you just got off the beach. It must be good. Life must be good down there.
I actually just got out of the gym, man.
Okay.
I had a hike, one up. So we got this place, Sultara, down here. And, I've always been a real kind of nature buff and hiker. I grew up in Canada. I always loved being in the forest and the mountains. And then I started traveling South America and Central America and started to love the beach. And then I decided, 5 years ago that I wanted 3 properties, one on the beach, one in the jungle, and one on the mountains. And then I found this place about 4 years ago here in Costa Rica. That's a beachfront, jungly property with a mountain right outside the door. So I basically got a 3-in-1 package deal here. So yeah, I got.
They made it just for you.
I've got to make a business out of it to sustain it. But I basically got up this morning, threw my clothes on, went over to Sultara, did a hike up the mountain to warm up, and then I've got my own gym there. So it's shared with all our clients and everything, but I built it, and I consider it I put all the stuff in there according to my own taste. So then I had a workout. Came here, crushed a shower, and here we are.
Here we are.
So,
Man, you mentioned
still sweating a little bit.
You've mentioned it twice a little bit here. Sultara. Tell me a little bit about Sultara. What is Sultara?
Soltara Healing Center is Shipibo. Shipibo is an indigenous tradition of ayahuasca healing or shamanism, as some people refer to it, that we built here in Costa Rica as a continuation from the work that I was doing in Peru. So I started in the field of ayahuasca about 10 years ago in 2010, and in 2014 built a retreat center in the Peruvian Amazon, ran that for 3 or 4 years, I guess about 3 years. And then in 2017, I sold that, came up to Costa Rica in the interest of having a little more beach time, having a little more in the way of a developed kind of lifestyle, a little more proximity to North America, and all kinds of amazing benefits that Costa Rica boasts. Came up here in 2017, started building this retreat center. We opened in 2018, and basically now what we're doing is serving 20 customers a week. They come in for a week at a time and do these healing retreats with ayahuasca medicine, which is a plant medicine from the Amazon jungle, of course, psychedelic, very visionary healing medicine. And we work with the same Shipibo tradition that we worked with in the Amazon. But just instead of doing it in the Amazon, we essentially transplanted the traditions up from the Amazon into Costa Rica. And so that's what we do here. We, it's a beautiful beachfront resort and retreat center, and we host people from all over the world. Of course, right now, though, due to COVID and the lockdowns in many countries like Canada, like around Europe, like Australia, New Zealand, most of who we're serving right now are Americans.
Okay. I want to get into the ayahuasca thing because I'm so interested and petrified all in the same. So, but how did you get into this kind of work? What drew you to this? Something, your past, your history, your story had to get you here. So let me hear about it.
Yeah, man. Well, like many people in this line of work, I started having interest in the medicine and working with the medicine based on my own personal needs, my own personal lifestyle, right? I found myself in a position where I was having difficulty in life, and I was struggling to find my path. I was struggling to find the relationships I wanted. I was struggling to earn a living. I was really just struggling to be happy. I was very depressed. I was lost. I felt like I had no hope in life.
How old were you here during this struggle?
Going on 30, kind of the end of my 20s. I had a real adventurous decade in my 20s. I used to party a lot and do a lot of traveling and stuff like that, which was great when I was a bohemian backpacker that didn't really need a lot of money to live, and was able to take risks, whether physical risks or lifestyle risks and stuff like that. And then, you know, approaching 30, I found myself in the position that I think all too many people find themselves in, which is like, yo, I'm getting older now. I've got to figure my shit out, you know, and I found myself feeling like I was being judged by the females that I wanted to engage in like romantic partnerships. It's like, you know, you start to date like 30-year-old women. It's like, okay, well, they start looking at you like, what are you doing with your life? You know, do you have your shit together? Are you making resources? Are you the kind of candidate that can someday support a family or someday be responsible enough to be in a long-term, you know, beneficial relationship or even marriage? And I had gotten all this amazing life experience. I'd spent a lot of time in South America, working in tourism, traveling around, beating myself up, getting in trouble. And, you know, I had this wealth of experience, but I didn't have any real career or any real direction or any resources to show for it. And that all kind of culminated one night in Australia when I went rock climbing in the middle of the night when I had a bottle of whiskey in me, and I ended up falling 20 meters from a cliff and hitting the ground, shattering my femur and breaking my pelvis in half, and spending the next 40 days in a hospital in Australia. And, you know, like I had lots of time to think while in this hospital, and I kind of had this personal crisis where I'm like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I need some help. You know, I was experiencing a lot of negative mindset circulation, like just kind of it felt like I had some negative like programs in my head, like software, like bugs in the software that was just you know, fucking everything up basically. And I was aware of what ayahuasca was, but I was like you are right now. I was terrified of it. You know, I was afraid to do it. I had taken psychedelics in the past, but what I heard about this ayahuasca was like, it's the most intense thing, makes you purge, makes you face all your demons, makes you confront all your traumas and all the things you don't want to see that you bury with, you know, substances or distractions or whatever. And when I was in that hospital bed, that was a good time to actually, you know, do some research about it. And I realized that I was pretty much at rock bottom in life. Because, you know, not only did I have all these things that were bothering me before, but here I was physically broken, laying in a hospital bed, and just had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So I did some research. I found, you know, some places to go, and I went and I experienced ayahuasca in 2010, and immediately this, just right from the first ceremony, it began to help me help myself. Where did you do it? Actually, I did my first ceremony in the United States.
Okay.
Funny enough, I intended to go to Peru to do it. So once I recovered from that accident in Australia, I went back to Canada. I gave up the life that I was trying to build in Australia, which was failing. And then I went back to Canada to start over. But on the way to Canada from Brisbane, I stopped in LA. And from LA, I made a cut down to Lima, Peru, and made an attempt at working with ayahuasca down in Peru, which didn't work out.
Excuse me.
Reasons. Bless you.
Thank you. COVID, man. Sorry.
I can't believe you're doing podcasts on COVID. But anyway, good on you.
Am I doing all right? Is it? I hope it's going. I hope it's not terrible.
You're fine.
And you won't catch it through the microphone.
I'm not too worried, anyways, man. You know, but yeah. So I made a cut down to Peru and tried to make an attempt at doing ayahuasca in Peru, but I got caught up in a number of incidents. I ended up getting kind of fucked up there. I got robbed and got food poisoning, and basically just I was already in a fragile state. I kind of got my ass kicked in Peru, which put me again right back to rock bottom. So I just said, fuck it, I got to go back to Canada, home, you know. But the thing is, in Peru, I met a guy who was involved with this ayahuasca circle in the United States. We became friends. So after I went back to Canada and started rebuilding my life in Canada, I got a new job and stuff like that. He invited me to come down to New Mexico and experience an ayahuasca ceremony in New Mexico, which I did. And luckily it was a very strong ceremony because I only had one, but just that first ceremony just kind of started me on this new path. It immediately woke me up. It immediately showed me this like path forward. It allowed me to forgive myself for a lot of the perceived mistakes that I had made in life and the regrets that I had in life. And that just really being able to forgive myself and love myself in that ceremony, it really changed the trajectory of my life because I started to do things without self-sabotaging and started to do things that were really in my own self-interest and in the interest of having a peaceful, fulfilled, happy existence. And because it had such a profound impact on me, I started getting into it. I started becoming more interested in studying the medicine and doing more plant ceremonies and dietas. And so I kind of started walking the path. And the fact that I had all this pre-existing travel experience and experience living and working and operating in South America, it was like a natural progression into, okay, well, I'm walking the ayahuasca path. I've already walked the tourism path. So then I just combined both of them. And I started then leading groups down into South America to work with the medicine. And did that for a few years, started my own little company, built that up from scratch, read the 4-hour work week and learned how to build simple websites and start to think like an entrepreneur and start to get out of my comfort zone and start to change my mindset really about what meant success. As Tim Ferriss explained, the new rich were people who had time freedom, who had mobility, and who had options rather than just money and being stuck in a job, but not having any options to go anywhere. So I started building my lifestyle around that paradigm. And I was working for the first couple of years in a full-time job. I was doing in my free time. I was also upping my qualifications in university, but then building this company on the side. And then a few years later, after having some traction and having customers and having reviews and running a few trips a year and building up the brand, I was able to acquire a very small investment. And that combined with the revenues that I was bringing in from bookings, I was able to form a relationship with a small tribe in the Amazon, a village of about 300 people, from the Kakama indigenous culture. And they gave me a piece of land in their village to build a lodge, where then I started bringing Shipibo, which is another indigenous culture, Shipibo healers in to host retreats there. And then I had this retreat center in the Amazon where I lived for a few years, ran a bunch of retreats there, kept building the brand, kept building the network, kept making connections. And then, when it came time to move up to Costa Rica, I had a track record. I had a solid business. I had a good network, influential connections. And because I had that track record and all these things, I was able to attract investment from about 15 different investors, about half of them who were customers from the retreat center who in Peru, who had come through that and they liked what we did there. They trusted me. So they were willing to invest in Costa Rica, which is a significantly bigger investment. As you may be aware, Costa Rica is not a cheap country, especially beachfront property. And the other half were from, kind of friends and family that had seen me improve over the previous, number of years, 6 or 7 years, that from that rock bottom point in Australia to having a thriving business in Peru. And I took that investment, came up to Costa Rica and built Sultara.
So a couple minutes back, you said woke up. You woke up. What was that like? Like, what was the awakening? So, like, before we get too much into the plant in and of itself, but like, what happened? What did the plant allow you to do? I guess is my saying, and was my question. And where did that like sounds like it was like that woke up as like this aha moment, or maybe I don't know, an aha period.
Yeah, well, it was really a self-forgiveness. It was a vision I had in the ceremony that, you know, I disliked myself a lot. In fact, I loathed myself before this ceremony, and it was for a lot of things. Like you can see, you know, I've got a crooked nose, I've got, you know, separated shoulders, I've got broken fingers, and then this fall from Australia, all these stupid things that I did most of the time while, you know, being wasted. And I didn't like what had become of me and what had become of my life. And I blamed all that on decisions that I had made, which of course, you know, we should be accountable for our decisions. And yes, it was my fault where I was because of the decisions I had made. But I guess the moment of waking up was in the ceremony. Part of what was so transformational for me was having a vision of me looking at myself from an outside perspective, like I was someone else looking at me. And what I saw was not the self-loathing and the regret of all these different things that, you know, the battle scars that I had, and all the imperfections that I had. It was a sense of love and forgiveness. It was me telling myself, oh my God, you're not such a bad guy. Why are you so hard on yourself? Why do you hate yourself so much? And then that was so transformational for me, because then I started to act out of, you know, the interest in my higher well-being, you know, and in making something of myself. And I stopped wasting all that mental energy, because man, when you're trapped in a cycle of regret and self-loathing and living in the past and wanting to do, you know, wishing you had made different decisions in the past, I mean, that takes up a lot of mental energy and a lot of emotional energy, right? So then you can't invest that into building a better future. So like,
I really can't get by. Like, so what you said right there, loving yourself, right? Like that you're not a bad guy. I just read this book called A Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield. And it really talked, like right in the beginning, it hooked me right in the beginning, because the idea that we're born bad or like born in sin and we need forgiveness. I don't understand how everyone doesn't end up depressed. Like that idea kills me, rather than like what he was talking about with this idea that we're born good. Like you're a good person. And look, obviously, you know, bad things happen and people might become bad, but who we are when we're born and what we are like at our core, like isn't bad. And it sounds like you were able to get out of that trap, right? Like the trap of I'm bad, or I'm born in sin and need forgiveness, or I fucked up in some way. And it was just weighing you down. Is that the switch?
It was a recognition that at that particular point on the space-time continuum was the perfect point for me to be at that exact time. So if that was the exact perfect point for me to be in, the place and the time and the exact situation I was in, if that was exactly perfect at that time, then everything I'd done in the past was also perfect, and it was leading me to that point. So there's you know, so then that's not only forgiveness, it's like that's the path. And each one of those things that had happened was an inflection point on that path, a breadcrumb, if you will, leading me to this perfect point. So at that perfect point, it's like, okay, you know, there's a difference between acknowledging that you're accountable for your outcome and for your decisions and for where you are in life, and lamenting all that stuff. So it's like, okay, so, you know, all of those things, yes, I was not in the ideal, you know, place from a career perspective and all that. But at that point, I took accountability for where I was. Now, all these things led me to this perfect point. But from here going forward, I'm just not going to have regrets. Even if I make a mistake, I'm aware that 10 years down the road, that mistake is going to mean something, because 10 years down the road, I'm going to be in the exact perfect place and time that I need to be at that time. So any of these mistakes, perceived mistakes or failures or lessons along the way, I basically stopped having regrets at that point. So even if something fucked up happens and I feel bad or I regret, I think I took a deeper accountability for my actions. So now when I contemplate my actions a lot more before I take action, understanding that, whatever happens from this, I'm going to be accountable for the outcome. And I want a good outcome. I want an outcome that makes me happy, that makes me feel fulfilled, that allows me to be of service and to be a productive member of society. So taking accountability for that really not only eliminated the sense of regret from the past and going forward into the future, it also showed me that I have a lot of power to influence my own outcome, that the decisions I make lead to something. So, take better care of the decisions you make and then own that outcome. But if you want that outcome, it's a product of the decisions that you make between now and then. So, it's just kind of like, it shifted the way I looked at taking action in life. It shifted the way I looked at the past, and it shifted the way I looked at the future. So then when I started getting into like the Tim Ferriss thinking, then I realized one very also critical wake up call that I guess might be relevant to your listeners was that I essentially realized that the only way to really get ahead financially in the world from zero, from being an employee with no savings, no money to invest, and no real strong trajectory, is either with sales or with entrepreneurship. Otherwise, when you're an employee working in a company with a regular job, you're bound by the company politics. You're bound by what other people are making who do similar jobs. If you're in sales and you get an uncapped commission job, you can make as much as you work, basically. If you want to put in 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and make those extra 50 calls every day, you could easily find yourself in the mid 600s or even seven figures, or mid six figures or even seven figures working a sales job. And nobody can judge you on the politics of the company, because anybody, if anyone judges you when you're in a high performing sales job, it's like, okay, well, you go do it then. You go put those 70 or 80 hours a week in, you make those extra 50 calls a day, you get better at communicating with people and communicating your ideas. And sales is hard. So that's one way to go about it. The other way is by building a company, by becoming self-employed, by becoming an entrepreneur, because then you're basically at the top of the pyramid.
What do you call an entrepreneur? You've said it a couple of times. I want to know what your definition of an entrepreneur is.
Well, I think what I would consider an entrepreneur is a little bit beyond self-employed. I mean, self-employed employs entrepreneurial principles for you to be sustainable. But I think in my perspective, entrepreneurship involves having at least a handful of people working for you. Where you are, you have to structure and build a company, and you have to actually lead a team of people toward a vision that you basically set. So you can do just one business. One business, yeah. No, you can do as many as you want. No, I guess that for me, and this is just a conversation a little bit. I think entrepreneurship is you have to have more. You have to be successful at more than one, is what I would say. Sure. I mean, there's a minimum threshold. The minimum threshold is arguable. Right. I mean, for sure, a serial entrepreneur is when you build more than one business. All right. You might have got me there. All right. Entrepreneur is when you start a business from nothing and you build it up and you're running a team of people and you're working toward a vision and a goal, you know,
Right.
and succeeding.
You might have shifted me a little bit.
But either way, I've hit the minimum threshold.
Yeah, for sure. I get it. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to argue about entrepreneurship here. I get all annoyed though when people say they're entrepreneurs and they're like on Facebook, like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're not.
They run an Instagram account that pays them, $50,000 a year or whatever, and they're an entrepreneur.
You're not an entrepreneur yet. Yeah,
I don't buy it. I think when you have to get into actually leading people and managing people, managing a team, that's when life gets complicated. And you're not going to make any real money in entrepreneurship unless you have, a bunch of people working for you. You know what I mean?
It's so interesting because I believe in entrepreneurship and I run a company, right? So you need employees, like what you were just talking about. It's very hard to get ahead working for somebody.
Impossible.
Like almost impossible.
I mean, depends on what your definition of a head is, right? Like you can be a linchpin.
Make a lot of money. Yeah.
You can be an employee and make good money if you're especially in a startup company and you can kind of embed yourself and become really high value. You can get some equity in the company. You can make good money. You can build high value for yourself and you can earn a really high salary. And if you have a really high salary and you put most of it away, then you're saving and then you're investing. And then over a few, 5 or 10 years, then your investments free you from having to work for somebody, and then you're an investor, and then maybe you start a business or whatever. But you can still get ahead as an employee, but it's just a lot more difficult.
Right. I agree. I want to talk about the plant. Tell me more about the plant. Because I like you said, I'm petrified and super interested.
Sure. So what do you know about ayahuasca? Let's start there.
I mean, I know a decent amount, not you, right? Obviously. I know it's ceremonial. I know you drink a cup and then you have maybe a second cup in the same ceremony. Everyone talks about that you're going to get real sick. So I take it that's the purge you were talking about. And then, you talk to the aliens and then they tell you all what's going on with you and, point you in a direction that can maybe help you in your life.
Sure. Yeah. So, on the purge, I haven't purged in probably 4 years, just to give you an idea. That's not a given. And in fact, here at Sultara, we don't, maybe 50% of people purge per ceremony or even less.
Right.
It's not a guarantee. It's more common if you drink a lot of medicine in terms of quantity, but we have really, really smooth medicine here that doesn't really, if the medicine's really well filtered when it's produced, it doesn't necessarily make you purge. Sometimes you purge by vomiting. Sometimes you purge intestinally, which is my favorite one because it cleans out all your guts, which is nice. Sometimes people purge with sweating or crying or kind of like thrashing around a little bit and or breathing heavily or there's different ways to purge. But the basic premise of the medicine is that you've got a combination of two plants, the ayahuasca vine, which is known as Banisteriopsis caapi or B. caapi, and then you've got typically an admixture plant with DMT. So the vine contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which prevents your body, the enzyme in your stomach from breaking down the DMT orally, and then you add an admixture plant, which then adds DMT to the brew. So there are a couple of different options. It
allows the DMT to get to you, right, rather than stopping it, right?
It allows the DMT to diffuse into your bloodstream through your stomach, and then have an active effect on your brain and body. So the most typical admixture plant that you'll find in the Amazon is probably chacruna, which is Socotra viridis. And that's generally what we use here. There's another one called wambisa, which is, I forget what the scientific name is, but it's Dilopteris or something, but I don't know. I don't want to guess at that, but those two plants contain DMT. They're from the Amazon, high amounts of DMT. So those mixed with the ayahuasca vine produce and cooked with water and reduced. So it's like a tea, but then you reduce it until it becomes like a syrup cooked over a campfire for many hours. Actually, where we're getting our medicine now, they take days to cook it. They cook it for days. They refilter it. They add more stuff. They boil it down. They filter it. They put it in another pot. They mix it all together. They reduce it. They filter it, and then you get this brew, and you pour it into a little cup, like a 2-ounce shot glass, and you drink it during the ceremony. It's a ceremonial setting, so people assemble in the Maloka. In our case, as I said, we work with the Shipibo tradition. So, the way they generally do it is in a circular ceremonial building with a cone-shaped roof, and everybody sits around the outside on mattresses and comes up to the healers. So we call them curanderos or healers. Other people refer to them as shamans, but they prefer maestros or curanderos. And people come up one at a time, and they imbibe the medicine. They're served medicine. They drink it out of the shot glass, and then go and sit back down in their spot. And within probably an hour, the healers drink after them. Within probably an hour, the healers start to sing. Now, the Shipibo work with what's called ikaros, which are healing songs or chants that they channel from the spirit world, and they bring it forward to cleanse the energetic body and the spiritual body, the emotional body of the patients in the room. So at first they sing their ikaros to the whole room as more of a broad kind of banishing of negative energies from the room and a protection put on the room. And then they'll go around each individual person and sing the ikaros to the individual, working specifically on a channel that goes directly toward the individual. And that takes about 6 hours, let's say 4 to 7 hours to conclude the ceremony. It's generally, it can be a fairly intense process, depending on the night. Some nights are wild in there. Some nights are super chill in there. Some nights are super beautiful in there. Some nights people are laughing and just in bliss. Some nights people are having nightmares. Some nights there's not a lot that goes on, and that's pretty much how it works.
What do you do when it goes bad for somebody? That's got to happen, right? Like people have to have a bad trip, so quote unquote.
Yeah. Quote unquote bad trip.
Yeah.
We try not to interfere too much because there's a lot of learning that comes out of challenging trips, challenging experiences. We don't call them good or bad. But if someone's really going through a hard time, then, the facilitators, we have facilitators that work with us as well. They'll go and spend time by the person's side, just kind of holding space or blowing tobacco smoke on them, like ceremonial tobacco, aka mapacho. Or the healers will come and spend some time with them and sing to them a few different ikaros. And if anyone really needs like a physical intervention, if they're running, they want to run away, or they need some physical help to get up and go to the bathroom or whatever, sometimes we intervene a little bit physically as well, but generally we try to let people go through their process and undergo whatever it is that's coming to the surface, because there's many things that come to the surface. in these ceremonies. And it's beneficial to go through it.
When you say come to the surface, explain some things that come to the surface for people.
Well, all of us have repressed memories and traumas, things that happened to us in earlier in life that we have buried, that we don't want to look at, that we have covered up with many different layers of self-talk and cultural programming and distractions and substances and, all different kinds of things, different things we're addicted to, whether that is, this, that, or the other thing. It doesn't need to be a substance. It could be a behavior. It could be a relationship pattern. It could be, social media or buying things or whatever.
Sure.
So sometimes people remember things that they had forgotten about, or sometimes they get a realization as it relates to someone in their life. There's just a plentitude of things that can bubble up in ceremony, and then we get a chance to process them. We process them. We relive them in a different light. We see them through a different perspective. We own them. We integrate them, and then they no longer own us in life. Sometimes we're oftentimes running on.
We're holding on to memories, right? That we don't even know about.
Yeah, subconscious programming that is largely based on responses to traumas that have happened in our lives, emotional traumas. And trauma is not necessarily what happens outside of us. It's what happens inside of us when that thing happens outside of us.
Yeah, I think trauma is mostly, it's not even what happens to you. It's how you perceive what happens to you.
Exactly.
Because if you don't perceive it bad, then cool, it ain't a trauma. But if it happens to you and you perceive it awful, even if it's not that bad, like somebody can have this one thing over here that was 1 to 10 level trauma is a 9, and they're like, it was a 1, not a trauma. Whereas you can have a 4 trauma, and if you're like, oh my god, worst thing ever, trauma. So
yeah, exactly.
So and we hold on to them, right? Like, I mean, they don't go away even after we're like, oh yeah, I'm over it. Not really.
Sometimes it's still buried there,
Right.
And it affects how we behave. It affects the kind of relationships we have. It affects the kind of jobs we take. It affects the amount of self-confidence and self-esteem we have. It affects our ability to be effective in the world. And
Would you recommend ayahuasca for everyone?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, there's some people who shouldn't work with ayahuasca.
Tell me who those people are.
Well, there's a number of psychological conditions that should not be imbibing ayahuasca: bipolar, manic depression, suicidal depression, schizophrenia, some dissociative personality disorders and things like that. So we have a very stringent intake process, which teases out these potential conditions. People have been and spent time in mental hospitals. Not a good idea to come and drink ayahuasca. People have a history of suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies. Not a good idea to drink ayahuasca. If you've got schizophrenia in your family history, not a good idea. It could open that up. Generally, for people who don't feel a calling to work with ayahuasca, it's maybe not a good idea. Some people don't want to be exposed to that exposure of having to face and process some of those repressed memories and traumas.
You're one of the first healers of any kind. I mean, from chiropractor to whatever that has ever said to me, no, man, my shit ain't for everybody. Because normally, right? Like they're like, everyone's like, oh no, I'll fix whatever. You're a muscle guy and you'll cure cancer. I'm like, man, you ain't curing cancer. So that I appreciated your answer of no. Because
I mean, I used to think that it was for everybody, but over the course of 10 years, I'm working with thousands of different people and also being involved in the field and hearing different stories. Yeah, man. Some people have adverse reactions, and there's usually a pattern to that. And it has to do with those aforementioned mental conditions. And also there's some, medications and drugs and addictions that if you have, you should not be mixing with ayahuasca. If you're on antidepressants, if you're taking SSRIs, you need to get off that shit before you drink ayahuasca. If you're addicted to drugs, you can't just show up at her door after having been doing opiates for 5 years or addicted to cocaine or even alcohol. You can't show up and drink ayahuasca because it could cause adverse reactions.
Sure. No, it makes, I just appreciate the honesty. I know we both got to run here soon. Just 2 questions that I ask everybody as we close the podcast. You and I don't know each other. We've never met before, 45 minutes ago. And not to like toot my own horn. I like to hear people's reasonings. So why would you say yes? Right. Cause like, I know you're way into Tim Ferriss. I'm not fucking Tim Ferriss, right? This podcast is not Tim Ferriss level. What's the reasoning for going on, some random dude who hit you up?
To be honest, your team was persistent.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I mean, we had like, I get a lot of requests from kind of, like beginning podcasts. I've got a beginning podcast as well. It's difficult to get people on, everybody, time is limited and everybody wants to go for the high reach. But, your team has been reaching out to me for 6 months or something like that. So, or even longer. So I just said,
squeaky wheel,
so
squeaky wheel. Yeah. I just like to hear it. Fuck yeah. Cool. Good job, Rory. When you listen to this, good work. I also believe that everyone has a unique power, something that they go out to the world with and become amazing with. What not makes a lot of money and not makes you famous or any of that bullshit, right? Something that you give back to the world. What would you say your power is?
Probably imagination, visualization. I can viscerally see and feel and put myself in a place in the outcome that I want. So like, for example, when I came to this property at Sultara, I knew I saw everything. Like, I'm like, okay, I get here. I see this is how this is going to look. And then it just becomes a process of building that. Right. But always with that, like, I feel as entrepreneurs, you really have to have a clear idea of where you're going and a clear vision and something that is captivating and that calls you and that really gets you excited. And I think lacking imagination makes it very difficult to be an entrepreneur because you don't have that. But I think that's probably my superpower as an entrepreneur. And the same thing happened when I built that center in Peru. Like, I got to that property, I'm like, I can see this whole thing, and I drew it out, and it's like, and then I was able to.
You knew where it was going to be before it was there.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's just about learning the tactics and strategies and how to be effective at manipulating the world around you to make that thing happen.
For sure.
And there's all kinds of books and information about how to do all the functional stuff, but to not have the imagination to see something and to get excited about it, I think is a fault as an entrepreneur. I don't think you can overcome that, because if you don't have the imagination and the creativity, you're not going to get the visions, right?
Right.
Or you're just going to run a business where it's like, okay, I want my spreadsheet to look this way. And then you just got your heads in spreadsheet manipulating numbers to get there. But to really create something, that makes you fucking feel alive, it's like, okay, you got to have that imagination.
That's what so that's a key difference for me with entrepreneurship too, is you have to like be in it. You're not just like, selling iPhone cases on Instagram or on the internet. But you just run businesses. Entrepreneurship to me is a feeling. It's you are in it and you live it. Is my answer to that question a little too. Man, thanks for coming on. I know you said you have a podcast. Tell everyone where they can listen to that podcast, where they can find out about Sultara, where they can learn everything they want about you and ayahuasca and the whole thing. So plug it away.
Sure, man. So my podcast is the Daniel Cleland Podcast. It's on my website, danielcleland.com. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube as well. We take video as well. And, of course, I'm on social media, Daniel Cleland. And then Sultara is on the internet at sultara.co, and also on social media at Soltara Healing Center is the handle, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and all that good stuff. And all kinds of really good content. YouTube channel for Sultara as well. Lots of educational videos about ayahuasca. I've produced a couple of documentaries about ayahuasca. If anybody is interested in those, they're also on my YouTube channel and my website. So there's all kinds of info if you just check out that stuff.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. Super educational, super interesting perspective. Like I said, really appreciate saying no, man. Everyone shouldn't come do this shit, because that is not something you hear often, like I said. So more power to you guys. As always, Daniel has his own power and I have my own power. Don't go out in the world and try to be Daniel, and don't go out in the world and try to be me. You all go out there and you find your power.